Historian Raymond Ibrahim explains how al-Zut are described in the Muslim sources.
According to Islam's written records, they were a migrant people from India or modern-day Pakistan, described in the sources as very tall, very dark-skinned, very lean, strong and hardy, and often used for labor-intensive work. In early Arabic ethnographies and literary works, al-Zut are also depicted as being very sexual and virile, with very large penises. In fact, according to one Arabic source, al-Tashibbahat by Ibn Abi Awan, quote, "The penis of al-Zut never weakens," meaning their large phalluses never go limp and are ever ready. I'm sorry for the crude language, but this is what the Islamic texts say, verbatim.
Could the men of al-Zut transfer their virility and manliness into Muhammad? Let's find out by reading a now infamous hadith from Musnad Ahmad. Abdullah ibn Masud related, "The Messenger of Allah sent for me, so we set out until I reached such and such a place, and he traced a line for me and told me, 'Stay between the two edges of this. Don't go outside of it. If you go outside of it, it's over for you.'" Muhammad knew that Abdullah wasn't man enough to endure the men of al-Zut. Abdullah said, "And so I stayed there. Then the Messenger of Allah went off a stone's throw away, or a little farther, or something like that. Then he, Abdullah, mentioned a group of male members, Hanin, i.e. men, who looked like Zut people. Affan narrated, or something like what Affan said, Allah willing, they didn't have any clothes on. You don't say. And I didn't see their genitals, and they were tall and scrawny. He, Abdullah, said, and they came and started to ride the Messenger of Allah, and the Prophet of Allah began to recite to them. And they started to move closer and lean around me and get in my way, and I became intensely terrified of them, so I sat down, or something like that. He sat down, thus protecting the part of him they were after. And when the morning light broke, they began to go away, or something like that. Then the Messenger of Allah came back exhausted and in pain, I'll bet, or practically in pain, from how they had ridden him. He said, "Indeed, I am exhausted," or something like that. Then the Messenger of Allah put his head in my lap, or something like that. And the men came with tall white garments on, but the Messenger of Allah had fallen asleep. And I became more intensely terrified of them than I was the first time. The men of al-Zut rode Muhammad all night long.
Ex-con, former mental patient David Wood is confusing his prison fantasies with authentic hadith. We all know the only person who was rode was David Wood when he was in prison by his prison boyfriends. This video also proves that David Wood is gullible and he believes anything these Arab Christians say without doing any fact checking on anything. So David Wood is one of the most gullible Christian apologist I know. He believes anything without doing any kind of fact-checking. It is no wonder why Dr. Richard Carrier, who's a friend of mine, said David Wood is a hopeless liar. So even these atheists call David Wood a hopeless liar. So let's look at whether that hadith is authentic or not. Okay, so I looked into this hadith. I looked into the Musnad Ahmad narration that was cited in that video, and this hadith is not authentic, so it cannot be used as evidence against the Prophet Muhammad. It can't be used. Ibn Kathir mentioned it in his tafsir and noted that it is extremely strange. That means it's weak. The hadith was also graded weak by the scholars who verified Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the source of that hadith, under the supervision of Shaykh Shuayb al-Arnaut, due to the fact that Ibn Masud most likely did not witness the night the Prophet Muhammad met the jinn. Several scholars have also found issues with the chain of narrators, or the sources for that story found in Musnad Ahmad. Found in Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal. As for the phrase, they began to ride the Messenger of Allah, it means the jinn were following him closely, crowding around him and pressing near him, not physically like jumping on him or mounting him. This is supported by al-Bayhaqi's narration in Dalail, al-Nubuwwah. They crowded around the Prophet Muhammad. Ibn al-Athir explained in al-Nihayah fi Gharib al-Hadith that such expression that can mean to follow closely or come right after someone, as in I rode his path, meaning I followed him. So this hadith is not authentic. That's the first thing. The other thing is that this hadith does not mean someone like physically mounting or someone physically jumping on somebody. It just means somebody riding, means somebody following somebody closely in the Arabic language. It does not mean like somebody mounting on somebody or somebody physically jumping or having some kind of physical interactions with anybody. So again, David Wood doesn't know the Arabic language. The Arabic language, that word in the Arabic language means to follow closely, not to physically mount on somebody, etc. But the point is that this hadith is not authentic. Ibn Kathir said it's not authentic. Shuayb al-Arnaut said that hadith is not authentic, who verified or classified what's authentic and not authentic in Musnad Ahmad, etc., etc. So that hadith is not authentic and it can't be used as evidence against the Prophet Muhammad. And the fact that another thing is that Ibn Masud did not witness, that incident of the Prophet Muhammad in the Quran, chapter 72. So that hadith cannot be used as evidence against the Prophet Muhammad. So that hadith is not authentic. Ibn Kathir says it's not authentic. Shuayb al-Arnaut says it's not authentic. So these classical big shot Muslim scholars say that the hadith is not authentic because it does not have sound chain of narrators, or it doesn't have a sound isnad or a sound chain of transmission. That means that hadith can be tossed out. It can be thrown out because Muslim scholars like Ibn Kathir and Shuayb al-Arnaut said that hadith is not authentic. So that hadith cannot be used as evidence against the Prophet Muhammad. So we can throw that hadith out the window. So the conclusion we can draw here is that the hadith from Musnad Ahmad is not authentic according to Ibn Kathir, Shaykh Shuayb al-Arnaut, etc. Thus, this hadith cannot be used as evidence against the Prophet Muhammad. There is no, al-Zut people physically mounting the Prophet Muhammad. That hadith is not authentic according to the Muslim scholars I just cited, Ibn Kathir, al-Nubuwwah, etc. The only person who was rode actually was David Wood when he was in prison by his prison boyfriends. So David Wood is confusing his experiences in prison or his prison fantasies with authentic hadith. So, we all know David Wood was rode in prison. Either he was riding somebody or somebody was riding him, or these black inmates were riding him or he was riding them. I don't know. But it seems like David Wood is the one who would actually ride people instead of, I think people rode him and he rode them in prison. Now David Wood rides Apus when they sleep over in each other's houses. So again, David Wood is confusing his prison experiences with authentic hadith, or his prison fantasies with authentic hadith. We all know the only person who was rode was David Wood when he was in prison, and when he sleeps over in Apus's house, David Wood rides Apus because Apus is David Wood's favorite boyfriend these days. Stay tuned for part 3 of this series of refutations.